Greetings, everyone. This is the International Council for Small Business. My name is Ayman Tarabishi. I'm the ICSB Executive Director and Deputy Chair of the Department of Management at the George Washington University. I hope you had a good weekend. Today is Monday, June 29th. We are delighted to be with you all here. And this is the ICSB Exchange webinars. We've been doing them now since March 12th. So it's very extensive, and we are just delighted as we move forward with it. We celebrated June 27, MSME Day on Saturday, and we had over 80 countries watching in on our YouTube channel, on our Facebook and Twitter. So we're just delighted. But as we quickly move, the world doesn't stop with MSME Day, and I'm just excited with our next session here. This is a personal favorite of mine. And it's the ICSB and the Arts series here. And the session title is Society for Arts, Entrepreneurship, Education. And so this is going to be a fascinating webinar. And I'm delighted and excited to welcome my colleagues, Dr. Todd A. Stuart. He is an artist, entrepreneur, or let me correct this. He is an entrepreneur, artist, and educator. And he is currently an assistant teaching professor and the director of arts management and entrepreneurship at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. He is the president-elect of the Society for Arts, Entrepreneurship, and Education, and this is the title of our webinar. I'm also delighted and excited to introduce Dr. Josef Hanson. He is an assistant professor and coordinator of music education in the Rudi E. Scheidt School of Music at the University of Memphis. He serves as the president of the Society for Arts, Entrepreneurship, Education, and managing editor of the organization's new journal, the Journal of Arts, Entrepreneurship, Education. Todd, Joseph, we're delighted. ICSB welcomes you all. We're delighted to have you here. I hope you are doing well and you are all safe. Todd, I'm going to give it to you to give you the floor, and we'll take it from there, and we'll come back with questions and answers a little bit later on. Go for it.
That's great. Thank you, Ayman, so much for inviting Joe and I to speak to ICSB. I think we have a lot that we can do together as organizations, and I look forward to that future. So thank you for bringing us in. One note about my bio is actually I'm not a doctor, not a PhD. My background is as an artist in the theater. So my degree is actually a Master of Fine Arts in Theater. I also went back and got a thing called an MBA so I could understand business a little bit better. I've always wanted to connect my love of the arts and my interest and love of business. And so that is what brought me to higher ed 6 years ago. So I've been running the program at Miami now for 6 years, and took a program that had 34 students and have built it up to about 200 students in arts management and entrepreneurship. So today, I just give you a quick overview. We're going to talk about the Society of Arts, Entrepreneurship, Education. We're going to talk a little bit about our conference, which is one of our main focuses of the Society. We're going to talk about our new journal, or actually not new, it's relaunched, I guess, Joe, is what we would say. And then we're going to talk a bit about arts entrepreneurship and what it is and what it isn't to us. And we're hopefully going to have some time at the end to have questions. So feel free to type a question as we go along, and we'll try to get to all those at the end. So Joe, you want to talk a little bit about yourself, maybe anything in your background, and then give us a sort of an overview of SAEE?
Sure, thanks Todd, and Ayman and everybody at ICSB. We really appreciate this opportunity to connect. So thank you for having us. And thank you for the introduction. So yes, I'm a music professor, and I kind of fell into the entrepreneurial world backwards, if you will. I was working at the University of Rochester in New York State, and they had received a Kauffman Foundation grant to boost entrepreneurial activity on campus. And the building where my music office was located happened to also be the building where the new office for this entrepreneurial endeavor was set up. And so every morning as I walked in to go to work, I would walk right past that office. And one day I just decided spontaneously to stop in and ask them what they were doing in there. And that set off a chain reaction. And at the time I was pursuing my doctoral studies. I ended up adding a cognate area in entrepreneurship and taking courses, which then informed my dissertation research. So I always like telling that story about, just taking the time to stop in and ask people what they're doing. And the chief touchstone for me, now I've had kind of a lot of lives, I think, in my professional life as a musician. I'm a brass performer, and I also play a little bit of percussion. But I've also been a university educator, a university administrator, a K through 12 music educator, and what I like to tell my students, a teacherpreneur. But for me, the touchstone that I refer to a lot, I don't have an extensive background in venture capital or some of the things that I'm sure some of you listening know about or have a lot of experience with. But I have built businesses, and the one that I always use as a point of reference is I kind of discovered back when I lived in New York State a market for arts and cultural programming in retirement homes. In fact, it was a robust and untapped market. And so I was able to build a business to address that market need. Not just bringing in performances, but all kinds of cultural programming and collegiate style courses. Baby boomers are only living longer and wanting to stay more active. And so that was a really fulfilling and meaningful experience for me. And I'm happy to say that I exited at the right time, not to make light of it, but when you consider what's happening in retirement homes today with COVID-19. But anyway, so that's a little bit about me. And let's talk a little bit about our organization, the Society for Arts Entrepreneurship Education, or SAEE. It's a relatively young, formal organization, but it's been around as an idea for quite some time. Back in 2013, it came about kind of propelled by two intertwined phenomena. The first being that at that time, this infusion of entrepreneurial principles into schools of art, schools of music, into higher education in the arts had really reached critical mass. And at that time, there were over 100 universities in the United States alone that were offering a standalone course in arts entrepreneurship or something similar. At this point, that number is probably almost twice that. So you had this phenomenon rising of arts entrepreneurship at the higher ed level. But what you also had is the fact that nearly all of the individuals teaching those dedicated courses were the only ones at their institutions doing so, which created isolation and a lack of support potentially. So in 2014, the co-founders of our organization, who are Jim Hart at Southern Methodist University, widely known for his games-based approach to experiential entrepreneurship education, and also Gary Beckman, who's at North Carolina State University, and kind of the most widely cited, I would say, scholar in our area right now of arts entrepreneurship. Those two came together and decided, let's put together sort of a test conference, if you will, see what the response is, and see about the idea of formalizing this into a professional society. And so that's what they did in 2014, and it was a hit. And we've been having a conference every year since. And in 2015, we had a conference at Ohio State, and that's when SAEE became a legitimate 501c3 organization. So we're about 5 years old, still relatively young, but we have come a long way since those early days. Our mission is to advance formal training and high educational standards for arts entrepreneurship education. And at present, we do that by, of course, hosting our annual conference. presenting a variety of webinars and other opportunities for our members to connect, much like what we're doing right now with all of you. And more recently, by promoting high quality scholarship. And we're trying to set that trajectory in our emerging field. And that's manifest in our new or rebooted journal, which we'll talk about in a bit. We've established an awards program to recognize some of the outstanding work that's taking place in our field. And the one thing I always like to talk about is how fascinatingly diverse our group is. It is nothing to sit down at our conference and find yourself engrossed in a conversation with a business school professor or maybe a lawyer and a visual artist and someone who used to be a clown in the circus. And that's not just a hypothetical. We did used to have a clown in our group, a wonderful person. And so I believe it's that intellectual and interdisciplinary mix that keeps people coming back to our conferences and wanting to engage with our group. So that's our group in a nutshell. And we've got a lot of exciting momentum, but certainly more growth to come. In fact, this week we're running our election for our next couple of openings on our board. So there's a lot of excitement around that. So that gives you an idea of our organization. At this point, Todd, are you going to talk about our conference?
Yeah, I'd like to just touch on that because that has been our flagship event. And I also think it might be of interest to some of the ICSB members here. As Joe mentioned, we are very diverse. Being arts and entrepreneurship, we do draw from business school, we do draw from art schools, we draw from conservatory. We have a lot of conservatory in both the visual and performing arts that are part of our membership. And so our conference is where we get together to share best practices, our research, but also and importantly, is how we're educating students in arts entrepreneurship. And as a field, in other words, we're not a discipline. I think entrepreneurship was first taught on a college campus in either late 40s, early 50s. I think arts entrepreneurship as a field, I know going back to about 2010-ish is when I heard about that term, where art and entrepreneurship were connected together. And so we're relatively new. And as such, we're developing this discipline. In fact, we only have one tenured professor in the country in arts entrepreneurship so far. So very, very new. So the conference is important for sharing those teaching methods, sharing the research that we're doing, and trying to connect as a community. So I'm gonna share my screen here for just a minute. Theoretically, there we go. You see our webpage, Joe?
Yes.
All right. So I just wanted to point out, so this is our website, societyaee.org, and it's got all of our conferences, and with most of them, it has some information about the conferences. We try to host it at a college campus, and we've been in the Midwest, we've been on the West Coast. Hopefully at some point we'll do one internationally. We just started getting international members. We have members from Australia. We have some interest from South Korea. What was that other group that couldn't make the last conference because of their visa issues, Joe?
They were from Malaysia.
Yeah, Malaysia. So we're starting to become more international, and that's certainly something that that's one of our goals. So just to give you a sense of, what happens at our conferences, we usually have a plenary speaker or presentation from the host university. And then depending on what the university has and what their connection is with their entrepreneurship program, Millikan hosted us at their Center for Entrepreneurship, where They teach both entrepreneurship, like a business school perspective, but also from an arts perspective, since they're smaller. We were recently at Iowa State, and their gentleman who hosted us there actually is in their entrepreneurship program in the business school. So we were part of that. I did want to note in 2016, we had Dr. Heidi Neck from Babson as our keynote address. So we try to get someone that has, that can really inform our membership about what's happening, not just in arts entrepreneurship necessarily, but in entrepreneurship, because there's a lot of connection, of course, between the two. And then we give out different awards. We have a teaching award that we give out each year for innovative pedagogy, and we also give out a research award for high quality research. So we hold one every year in October. Typically this year, like so many things, our conference committee, and Joe, you might be able to update a little bit more on this, but our conference committee is planning something. I believe we're going to hold it in October, but I know it's going to be online. So more to come. If we go to that 2020 page, we were going to be out in LA in California, which would have been gorgeous at this time of year. So we will update this as soon as we have a board meeting Friday, and we'll probably have some more information to talk about. So that's our conference. And Joe, I thought the other thing we should touch on before we have our discussion is the journal, the relaunch of our journal. And also, maybe you could mention a bit about Artivate, or the other journal in our field.
Sure thing, Todd. And just to touch on what you said, I don't have any other details, unfortunately, right now to share about the conference, but those will be forthcoming soon. It will be virtual. It will take place this fall. Okay, so we do, as we mentioned, have a new journal, and I'm going to pull up a screenshot. There we go. You should see Journal of Arts Entrepreneurship Education. I don't know if I can make this go away somewhere. There. Yeah, so this is hot off the presses because it's actually still in the final stages of being developed, but the Journal of Arts Entrepreneurship Education actually existed before SAEE became associated with it. North Carolina State University had started 2 journals in this area, one with this name, the other one called the Journal of Arts Entrepreneurship Research, and they fell dormant. And so our society decided to acquire the rights to both and then collapse them together into just JAEE, the first name. So we are rebooting this, and we're very excited about it. The first issue, which is actually a collection of short essays from various leaders within different arts disciplines, that will be coming out later this summer. And then we'll have a full call for proposals if anybody's interested. It is online and open access, and it's fully indexed so that it appears in all of the major scholarly search engines. As authors, you retain copyright, so you can disseminate the work however you see fit, upload it into different databases if you want, make as many photocopies, electronically send it to whoever you want. And there are absolutely no paywalls, and you don't pay anything to publish. Now, there are other venues for arts entrepreneurship scholarship. And Todd mentioned Artivate, which is right now kind of the go-to venue for publishing your research in this area of arts entrepreneurship education, or anything related to it, really. And Artivate was founded by members of SAEE. It's a great journal. It's certainly set the standard for many years now. So what we're trying to do is complement that, and as the name of our journal might suggest, really try to drill down into the details of teaching and learning in this space. So it may be a little bit more focused in that sense. But what we also hope will differentiate us, not necessarily from Artibate, but just from any scholarly venue where you might feature your work, is the willingness of our editorial board to engage with authors, work alongside them to make their work the best it can be, and really not to be a door slamming in people's faces when they submit something. We really want to try to be that helpful force in our field to push things forward. Our journal will publish a lot of different forms of research: theoretical, empirically driven research, reflective or practice-based articles, teaching cases. These could be full-length or short form. They could be more persuasive or more data-driven and objective. We're actually setting some standards right now, which will be available once our website fully launches, for case studies, since that seems to be a popular form of research in other aspects of entrepreneurship. So we want to make sure we're very clear about what the standards would be to submit a case study, whether it's truly a case study in the qualitative sense, or a multiple case study, or whether it's a teaching case. But literature reviews, any kind of historical analysis, a curricular framework, anything like that would be fair game for this journal. And it is a double-blind, peer-reviewed journal. So as I mentioned, that inaugural reboot issue will come out later this summer. And we're hoping with those essays from a variety of leaders in different arts disciplines that it will set a trajectory so that the insights that they share will help shape the field as it continues to emerge and shape the scholarship, at least in the short term, so that the most pressing or fascinating avenues of scholarship will start to emerge and be prioritized. Now, I do also want to say, last thing on this, that we especially welcome non-artists to contribute either single-authored manuscripts or something that might be co-authored with an artist, and we could even facilitate that connection. We're eager to showcase intersections among business school lines of inquiry and perspectives and priorities of artists. So we would totally welcome that. If you're wondering if this would work for you, if you're a researcher and you're thinking about your priorities and your agenda as a researcher, we would welcome that. We think it would be marvelous, actually, to try to make that crossover connection. So that's a little bit about our journal. The URL is actually still, I could give you the URL, maybe I can put it into the chat. It's kind of like a long sort of spaghetti URL at the moment, but we will be establishing a much easier to remember URL later this summer when everything goes live. So that's a little bit about our journal. Thank you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, we're very excited about that. You know, one of the things that I thought, we're going to talk about arts entrepreneurship and sort of our particular takes on the education of future arts entrepreneurs in a second. I did want to talk just briefly before we did that about how I think that we might be able to work together as organizations. You know, your focus, I was really happy to see your focus, that you had a focus on micro business as well as small business, because a lot of what we do would be micro. It definitely, I mean, I suppose it fits in the bucket of the definition of small business, but you know, when you look at some of the SBA definitions, we're just so small compared to that. So a lot of students are, you know, they want to be a freelance actor, right? So that fits in the bucket of what we do. They might want to work at a small not-for-profit arts organization. They might want to work in community arts, right? Work with the economic development arm of a city that uses the arts for economic development. So I certainly see, you know, what we do connecting with the ICSB, because we certainly typically don't have students go out and create big business. I mean, that's the work of the business school here. more corporate focused, and so art students typically would fit better in an organization like yours. So I just wanted to make that point. So yeah, Joe, I thought, now we could talk about, we've got about 20 minutes. I wanted to save 10 to 15 minutes at the end for questions. And if we can't fill that time, we can continue to talk about arts entrepreneurship all day, if you would like. But I thought you and I could just have a discussion about what arts entrepreneurship is and isn't for us, and how we approach teaching arts entrepreneurship.
Sounds good, Todd. Yeah, we could talk about it a long time, but one of the things I would start by saying, and hopefully others would find this fascinating, is that in our field, we struggle with a definition, like just starting from ground zero. What is arts entrepreneurship? I mean, people have written papers. It seems to be a vibrant area of study within our still emerging field, how we define it. And to paraphrase Gary Beckman, who I mentioned, who's one of our co-founders of our society, it's problematic, to say the least, to take the terms arts and entrepreneurship, both amorphous, and mash them together with the intent of clarifying this third construct, arts entrepreneurship. It's very difficult. So we can have conversations to no end in our area about this. I actually don't think it's such a bad thing that this debate over the definition shows no end. It should evolve, and it should represent differently for different people, I think. But that's a great starting place, is how would we even define this?
Yeah, so that is one of the debates. If you wonder what people who teach arts entrepreneurship do at the bar at the conference, is we sit and drink bourbon or your drink of choice, and we kind of discuss this topic. And there, I'm with Joe in the sense that I don't know that putting a definition or using a definition that exists or cobbling together an art and entrepreneurship definition is going to be descriptive and capture the whole of what arts entrepreneurship is. I was just reading an article one of our members wrote, is arts entrepreneurship art making? And this idea of are artists entrepreneurs or are entrepreneurs artists? And I kind of see them, I kind of see a lot of similarities from my background as being an artist, training in, the creative arts and creativity. And I started in a couple of different businesses, and the creativity that it takes to run a small business is no different in some ways. It's the expression of is different, but the creativity itself, when I was running a business, is no different than when right now I'm involved in photography, and I still do some theater work here and there, and the creativity is similar. So, I think sometimes we get caught up. I tried to put a quote in the chat, and for some reason it won't load, but if you guys are fans of Mintzberg, he said human nature insists on a definition for every concept. And so we've had some people that have tried to define it, and we've had some theories of entrepreneurship. And, as a field, and as we become a discipline, we will have to define it, right? But I think there's so many ways to approach it. The way I approach it here at Miami is, I think there's a lot to be said for, and I know that this particular term, some people don't like this term, scoff at it, but I think in our society today, having an entrepreneurial mindset, and what I mean is, there's this concept of that Sarah Sarasvathy at Virginia wrote about, and Heidi Neck has written a lot about, and it's this idea of effectuation. It's this idea of, you can either approach a problem in a causal way, meaning, and it's how my business school training was really, where you have this set of resources. Say you have 5 different resources. It could be money, time, it could be network, you know, any resource that you have. So you have those 5, and then how do you apply those to this goal that you have, right? So that's causal thinking, and that's like management thinking, and that's important part of the process. But effectuation is I think the step before that, and to me, it's how I think as an entrepreneur, which is this idea that I have these 5 resources. What 10 things can I do, right? So, and I especially think in the arts, it's important because we know that most students go on to have in the arts multiple revenue streams. So we try to teach them, yes, okay, you want to be a painter, great. So you also are really good at illustration. So that could be a revenue stream for you. You're also very good at teaching young kids. So you might be a teaching artist. So that could be another revenue stream. So I think that idea of effectuation really ties in with having multiple revenue streams, which is important for any artist, and certainly for someone that wants to be an arts entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Todd. It really is the mindset driving the skill set.
Yeah.
Before I forget, when we were talking about the term entrepreneurship or arts entrepreneurship, here's a shout out to anybody listening who is part of a business school, which I suspect might be a lot of people. If you could help us, friends, please help us by emancipating that term entrepreneurship. Let us have it too. Because you know how we get territorial, certainly in higher ed organizations. That's actually a chronic source of tension sometimes with people trying to start entrepreneurial programs within a different division of the university than the business school. So if you wouldn't mind just letting us have a little bit of slack there, we would appreciate it, because it's funny how people get very protective of that term. So in talking about defining the term or arts entrepreneurship and what it might mean to us, you know, it is valuable, of course, and necessary to operationalize it, because that feeds into what we're going to teach our students. So in some sense, we do have to have in the back of our mind a definition of what we think it is. So one of the things that those of you listening who aren't in the arts might not realize is that, at least personally speaking, within arts entrepreneurship, as it's growing and evolving, you know, you have a lot of people who like that term. It sounds like it's kind of sexy, it sells, but maybe they don't really know exactly what they're talking about. And so I see a lot of career skills being equated with entrepreneurial skills. And for me personally, I don't believe that those are synonymous. I think career skills, you know, maybe assist your entrepreneurial endeavors. They're not the same. So I'm talking about things like networking, creating an effective social media presence. These are all things that are important, and they are all, to me, means to achieve entrepreneurial ends. But did you know that a lot of arts faculty out there are treating those as the same? And I think that's a problem, because quite frankly, personally speaking, I'm not an expert in those areas. You know, buffing up your resume so that you get to the top of the list. That's not my expertise. And quite honestly, that's not what I'm interested in. So that needs to stop, in my opinion. What do you think, Todd?
Yeah, I agree. Touch on a couple of things. Going back to what you mentioned about business schools, that is surprisingly a hot topic at our conferences. And I'm lucky, I'm spoiled. We collaborate with the business school here with all the departments, but especially with the entrepreneurship department at Miami. I've taught over at the business school. I have their classes in my curriculum. So, but I'm not the norm. The norm is what Joe said. And it is funny, it's very territorial for a lot of people. And to me, it's, you know, I mean, I just don't see it, but you know, I'm lucky. So I did want to reinforce what Joe said. Yeah, career skills certainly important, and they, you know, we teach them in the program, and we have a great career center here that teaches them, but certainly not to me what arts entrepreneurship is. Uh, you know, I talked about critical reasoning, which I think is important to teach students at university. The other piece that's really important to me is creativity. In fact, the first class that students take in my program is a creative problem solving class. Because to me, as an artist or an entrepreneur, it's all about looking at a situation and synthesizing some different ideas and coming up with a new direction. So a novel direction. So it's creativity, very important. The tools are important, but a lot of times, I think we get caught up in the tools. We do have people in our organization that focus more on venture creation. And I think that's important. I have a class called Venture Creation. But before you take that, which is more of a tools class, you know, it's how do you market? How do you create your social media presence? How do you really activate your purpose as an artist or an arts leader? I think that's a great class. But until you can start thinking critically and creatively and applying that, then the tools, it doesn't really matter what tools you have. And I think tools are easier to learn outside of a university education anyway, but I do teach those. I think they are important, but I think that having that creativity, that critical reasoning skill, and really focusing on purpose. And, you know, I know you all know about business model canvas. And so in my program, we use something called the Arts Venture Canvas. And the reason is because sometimes an arts entrepreneur is not building a product to then exploit and make a living. Sometimes they're doing it because it's a part of who they are. There's a lot of artists who never turn their artistry into any kind of venture, but it's critical for that to be part of their life. And I think, you know, we're kind of stuck in some ways. Joe mentioned, and I talked about the business school push. We also get a push from our arts schools. Like, again, I'm lucky, and I spent a lot of time when I started here really talking with the chairs of other divisions, because there was some chairs that, frankly, you know, and faculty more than chairs, but faculty who thought, we don't need to teach this in an art school. Why are we teaching this? They teach that at the business school. And so we have to fight that fight too with artists that they don't understand. And I think it's because they think it's just venture career skills. And certainly that's part of it, but it's about, you know, it's about creating, Jeffrey Timmons has this great entrepreneurship definition, and it's about creating a world. It's about creating your future. And to me, that's at the heart of arts entrepreneurship, is creating your future in the arts, whatever that looks like. So maybe it's a venture. Maybe you go to Broadway and you act. We've had students do that. Maybe you start a chamber group and are very successful. Or maybe you just play, you know, you play roles in a community theater. But think about, you know, the impact of that theater in that community, and how the arts, this might not be a statistic that you're aware of, but everyone that goes to an arts event on average spends an extra $31 in the community. So think about the economic impact of the arts in a community, right? So we drive economy in cities, and, you know, we just, you know, whatever level artist or however you want to use your artistry, I think we need to teach students how to stay in the arts and not leave the arts.
I want to jump in here. This is Ayman Tarabishi here. Joe and Todd, you've been doing an absolutely fantastic webinar here with your introduction to hear what you all are doing here, because to be honest with you, I'm not sure a lot of people knew about you. And even if we have a small number in this webinar, which is not normal small here, this is a good number here, but we have a global outreach on our YouTube channel and ICSB TV and all our media. They'll pick this up here. But we have some questions here. And as ICSB, we had this conversation before here, but we have some questions here to ask you here and to try to tie it together with many different disciplines here and with different perspectives here. So you are laying a claim on the entrepreneurship, small and micro businesses. And I think, Todd, you said that I have a great relationship. Joe, you said, well, you know, it's a struggle or it's a challenge sometimes here. But at ICSB in December, we came out with a projection. We call it the end of the status quo. That what's happening in a new decade, in 2020, moving forward, and now with COVID and Corona and everything is changing. There's no status quo anymore. It's the end of the status quo here. So the claim of entrepreneurship being held by the business school, I think that's the old regime. That's the old systems here. You know, we are dealing with challenges that nobody sees here. I think our colleague Lenore Miller will say that I think 1/3 of museums and exhibits and so on will close because their business model is not sustainable anymore. So this is not something by chance. This is not something by choice. This is by necessity. If you don't innovate, if you're not entrepreneurial, you will die. Okay, so this is not asking for someone for favor here. It's saying this is survival. We need to improvise here. We need to, you know, pivot, whatever you want to call it here, but we need to think differently here. Your conference, your journal, everything that you're doing here is just starting what I call as a new way of thinking here. So saying this, how do you see the future playing out with, and I don't want to say it's called entrepreneurship in the arts. I would rather say it's the arts, right? And then arts with entrepreneurship coming, because entrepreneurship should stay silent, right? It's the word that nobody needs to say anymore. Everything has entrepreneurship in it. Science, engineering, healthcare, arts, everything has entrepreneurship in it. So how would you react to this? Let's start with you, Todd.
Yes, I agree. We could probably dispose of entrepreneurship, except, and I said this before, I mean, when we were talking, it is important from our perspective because we have to educate parents. And parents, you know, what we do in higher ed, parents do not want their students typically to study the arts. So one of my purposes here at Miami is to help students be able to study the arts, because I hear it from parents all the time. Oh, I'm so glad that they can study theater and arts management because then they get business skills and then I don't have to worry about whether they can make a living. So a little side note there is why, you know, I believe that it still has a purpose. But as far as the future, you know, the arts have always been entrepreneurial. You know, artist stares at a blank canvas and creates a work of art. I mean, what's more entrepreneurial than that to me? So I see, you know, we see businesses doing this. So a lot of it tends, for me anyway, tends to be marketing and not actually, I'm not sure how serious they are, but this idea of purpose-driven businesses and this idea of B Corps, this idea of we can't burn up our planet, we can't continue to consume plastic at the rate we're doing it because it's ruining our oceans ecosystem. So what I see is emerging of more than just arts and entrepreneurship. I mean, we do a lot with health here at Miami in the arts. So you know, an artist's perspective and a physicist's perspective are different. And so getting those two together, that's where you come up with the cool ideas, right? So I see more of artists working with people in other disciplines. And frankly, you know, artists, part of it's our fault. I mean, we stay in the studio, or we stay in the theater. We're not extroverts a lot of times, right? So we have not gone out there and said, hey, here's how we can help you. Here's how the creativity that we bring, or the art making skills that we bring, or the critical thinking skills that we bring, this is how we can help you. And we haven't done a good job of that. I think that's one of our jobs in arts entrepreneurship to do, is help tell that story.
Yep. Joseph, what do you think?
Yeah, fascinating. And of course, I don't have a crystal ball, but one of the things I've been thinking a lot about lately in light of the most recent issues in the world is kind of an ethical turn. Not that we're not ethical at the moment, but a greater emphasis on the ethics of entrepreneurship. And what I mean by that is, I'm assuming most people listening to this have heard of the starving artist, right? And we're here to tell you that in large part, at least in the past, that's actually a myth, the myth of the starving artist. Because when you look at the research, and there's an organization called SNAP, Strategic National Arts Alumni Project. Todd and I are affiliated with them in some of the research we're doing together. They have found recently that arts alumni, I believe over 80% of them had success finding a first job in an area that was at least reasonably close to the area of the arts that they studied in school, and that they were an almost equal number of them pretty happy with those outcomes. So we're always overcoming that when we're selling our programs to parents, especially, because the arts are seen as this black hole or this dead end professionally that you don't want to send your children down. How is that changing now that, unfortunately, the reality might be that it could be more of a black hole, or that could be closer to reality in the near future? Well, I don't know. But what I will say is that entrepreneurship in the past has been offered up kind of on a silver platter as a solution to this starving artist phenomenon. And it's been done in a kind of slapdash way. We have this ethical dilemma where we're saying, I'm thinking about my world of music, where we're showing this entrepreneurial mindset as a potential fix-all for what is undoubtedly a pretty complex, difficult job market. I'll give you an example. Orchestra musicians. Let's say you play clarinet, and your dream is to become an orchestral clarinet player in a top orchestra. Well, it's nothing at all to see hundreds and hundreds of musicians show up. You've all heard these stories, to audition for one opening for a clarinet player in an orchestra. So the odds of winning a job like that are not good. But instead of changing curriculum or changing their approach or their complete worldview of what it means to be training an artist, in this case, a musician for the future, it turns out that schools of music are very conservative places, and they tend to maintain the same approach they've used for 100 years. But now they can add a course on entrepreneurship, or at least slap that title to it, and tell students that if the orchestra market stinks, that they can go create an opportunity and it'll all be fine. And sometimes that happens. But you see where the problem is that the school itself really isn't modeling an entrepreneurial perspective at all. They're just kind of finding a way to self-preserve. And so that's always been a little bit of an ethical dilemma in what we do. And I think it's going to be turned up sideways on its head a little bit now that we're in this new era with a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah, thank you very much. You raise a lot of very good points here. And I want to bring our colleague, Jackie, and she goes, we provide enterprise support to hundreds of creative enterprises in Scotland. Their biggest challenge is marketing and selling. So we established a pilot platform for artisans to tell their stories and sell their products, ranging from fine art, jewelry, ceramics, textiles, a creative smart village. Do you know of any similar initiatives in other parts of the world we can partner with? So here you go, right? And I want to thank Jackie here, and I'll reach out to Jackie about this because this is really exciting. This ties to our 1010 program here. We're bringing small business and micro businesses here. But I'm going to start with you, Joe. what I say here is because of COVID, because of Corona, nothing is hidden anymore. Everything is visible. Everybody that tried to hide before behind systems, approaches, protocols, rules, things, no more. It's finished. Everything is on the table now. Everybody sees everybody. Everybody knows what's going on here. So as you mentioned this, which supports what I mentioned here, nothing is hidden anymore. The starving artist concept, yes, it might exist, but if you're not trying different things, you're not going to go anywhere. Similar to an entrepreneur trying to find a job or trying to find an angel investor. Nothing's different. Same. Different hat, same challenges. Okay? So saying this, understanding this, right? And you're bridging this world together here. We have a responsibility. You have a responsibility. I have a responsibility. What do we get to do about it? How do we help the jackies?
Yeah, so I don't think I heard all of that, but as I understand it, we're talking about marketing and selling. And this is a core issue in our area, which is value. You know, I like to talk a lot about creating value. Like Todd was saying, the value can be measured a lot of different ways. But in the end, if we're talking about like an artisan type situation, which I think we might be, one of the philosophical challenges for an arts entrepreneur is helping that person make that value real, especially to a customer or an audience. And consider this, those of you who aren't in the arts, at least in the United States, the average person, if I'm being real here, associates very little value with artistic practice. I mean, can you imagine, and I know that's a broad statement, but I'm talking about just typical person, pull them off the street. Maybe you get someone who's really supportive. But can you imagine a lawyer or a doctor or an accountant or even a business person who spends years or even decades becoming incredibly proficient in what they do, only to find out that their clients or their customers or their patients expect them to work for free? Well, that sounds absurd, right? But that's exactly the case for a lot of artists. In my world of music, like people don't understand, you know, if you've ever tried to hire someone to play at a wedding, you know, a lot of people are taken aback at how much the going rate is. So the unfortunate thing, not to sound too pessimistic, is sometimes art is not seen as essential and valuable by many people, at least in our country, in the way it should be. So we have to deal with that. And it's all about helping educate the people, go out and do customer research and find out a way to position themselves so that their value is more in line with maybe not only what people are willing to spend, but you know also what they're willing to do with their talents, what the artist will do. And this gets to the selling your art and selling out debate, which is another key debate for us. Like, at what point are you willing to go more commercial or sell out? And at what point are you willing to just stay within your own aesthetic and the more esoteric things that are core to you as an artist at your own peril? So that there's always a tension there that's really interesting. But those are just some of my thoughts. I don't know, Todd, maybe you heard the question a little better.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I'm doing a workshop this summer with a group of artists. So a group of some established and some just starting out, but all out of college, some out of college, 40 years. And when I'm talking, or when we're going to talk a lot about marketing and selling, because that's what they want to know about. So for them, they don't know how to find a market. They don't know how to price their work. They, in some cases, don't like to say the word profit, honestly. So, there's this idea that, it's one thing to run a business because it's typically they're profit driven, and that's what you're taught, that your job is to make a profit for the company and for shareholders if you're in a publicly held company. But students just are never taught. So I'm happy to hear about this pilot program the Smart Village, and also there's a movement in Egypt. And we have a lot of platforms in the US for different types of art. Like I mentioned, have picked up photography the last couple of years. And there are a number of sites that you can place your work on these sites, and theoretically you could get some, you know, there could be a market there for the work, right? People go on those sites to buy photography. But I tell you, for me, it's all about that persistence and understanding that if you're going to create an arts business, over half of your time is not creating art, it's creating business. And to get, you know, to Iman's earlier question, I think, yes, it's great to create these programs to help people sell their art. I think that's fantastic and we should do more of it. But I think what we need to do as well is to step back, and sort of what we're trying to do here is prepare students in the arts to look at not only and understand, like Joe said, value proposition, which is incredibly important, but also to understand that at the end, it might not be profit. It might be benefit, and benefit isn't necessarily profit. It could be that you're helping community, for instance, you're helping build your community, or you're helping, we do an arts for social change project in one of my creative thinking class. And it's about taking a social movement, like one of my students is doing something on, you know, food deserts, and how can art intersect with that. So I think, yes, I think it's important to have these programs, but I also think it's important to get artists to think in a bigger way, because just having those skills, if they don't kind of have the way of thinking about applying those skills, in my experience anyway, you know, I haven't seen that necessarily work, but I'm glad to see that we have some interesting projects going on. I hope they're successful.
Todd, let me ask you this question here, because I'm in Washington, D.C., and I noticed this, and I was having a conversation with Lenore Miller here because of the protest and what's going on. The art world is changing in the United States. And in front of the White House, they painted the street, Black Lives Matter. And I just read in the news that, you know, the Formula One, Mercedes, their cars are going to all be black. Art is a powerful message for justice, for hope, for awareness. For the street art has many powerful messages coming here, and entrepreneurship is seeked, as you mentioned here, is for opportunities. But there's social entrepreneurship, there's humane entrepreneurship here. What do you see as you're in the midst of all of this? What do you see as in your schools and universities? How can art, and in many different forms of art, from painting to music to theater, how do you see art playing a new dialogue, a new conversation with everybody? And that's maybe what we mean by entrepreneurship, looking at art in an entrepreneurial way to bring everybody together. What do you think about that? And then we'll switch it to Joe and we'll wrap it up.
That's a great question, Iman. There's, you know, multitudes of ways, I suppose. You know, art. One of the things we learn in the arts, or I learned, and my colleagues and my students seem to learn this, is this idea of storytelling. And so, you know, when we look at, I was looking at Columbus, Ohio today, a similar thing where they're painting Black Lives Matters, or maybe it was in Cincinnati, in front of the city hall. The artwork is beautiful as a public art project, is beautiful. But, you know, they're telling a story, right? And they're putting it in a context by putting it in front of City Hall. And it's being picked up by media all over the country. Some of the street murals I've seen in Cincinnati are just phenomenal, right? So the artists are out telling stories. And I think the more that we can do that in public, and that we get the art from inside of the theater to outside in the world, and get painting from inside the gallery or inside the museum to outside. So what I see, I suppose, is less about fine arts and more about art. You know, we have this conservatory expert mindset in the arts, and I think what the arts can do is be part of the community, and that's really what I think is the future of the arts, and not in the sort of, hey, we have a community arts center and we run these programs for kids, which is our model, or is a model that happens in the US a lot. But it's more about the artists being part of that conversation and telling those stories in a way that artists can tell, because arts can have that big impact on people's lives. Bigger impact maybe than a business that sole purpose really is making money, right? So if the arts can change the world, artists can change the world. And I think we're going to see a model. I was reading something the other day about artists as activists, and that's an entrepreneurial, that's part of being an entrepreneur. An arts entrepreneur is being this activist. So I think we're going to see more artist activists and art for social change.
Yeah, and Joseph, what do you think? Joe, what do you think?
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better. The arts speak to our humanity in ways that nothing else can. And if there's such a thing as a silver lining in this time that we're living in right now, not to make too light of it, it's that you can expect to see some phenomenal art. If you look throughout the course of history, the times when art is at its peak are typically times during and maybe right after some sort of chaos like this. So I think it's exciting in a way that is still respectful to what's happening kind of broader in our world.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, and I think you both have been very eloquent in addressing this here. Todd, let me go back to you here. You present your organization. You both present your organization extremely well here. Tell us, what do you think the theme is of the conference in the fall, and what do you hope to get out of it? And as a closing remarks here, to saying, here's what we really want to do. We're kickstarting everything here, but if we want something really, and it's a call to action to everything, what might that be?
So I think we're going to be talking about change, and I think you know, there's some mechanics of change as far as teaching things remotely. I think that's fundamentally going to change universities going forward. But I think also what we were just talking about, I think is going to be a theme of our discussions about the place of the arts in society, and what can we do as educators to get this story out about the arts and the arts' ability to impact society in a positive way.
Thank you, thank you. And Joe, you as president, and now you're in the process of becoming immediate past president here. You have to leave something, a mark, a legacy, a statement here. And I'm not asking you to give me your farewell speech here, but in a way, it's an opportunity for say, this is something that I'm really after here, and it's a call to action. So when we share it with the ICSB, we're saying, let's help Joe on this one. This is important.
Yeah, well, I would echo what Todd said. I mean, that's what our conference is going to be about. We've actually shied away in the past from doing distinct themes, but you know, there's always a theme. There's always a context, and maybe we will have a distinct theme this time. But in terms of this conference, it's going to be talking about what's happening now and what's happening to us as educators and what our students are feeling, and how to prepare them not just for now, but for what comes next.
Yeah.
So, you know, and I don't like talking about legacies any more than anybody else, but in terms of our organization, you know, we've come a long way. We really have. So I hope also that this conference will end up being a celebration of how far we've come. We'll have some new board members coming to join us, and you know, it's always a great time with our group.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is a great opportunity for everybody here to kind of rethink everything. And as my colleague, Dr. Alex DeNoble would say, is to reimagine here.
Yeah.
ICSB stands shoulder to shoulder with your organization. This is important. And as we talk about humane entrepreneurship, with humanity comes arts, or arts comes with humanity here. It just goes on from the beginning of time here. So we congratulate you. We support you. We will promote you heavily with your conference here. And lastly, as we talked before here, ICSB World Congress, with all that's going well in the future here, is going to be in Paris, right? It's going to be a beautiful place to celebrate the arts and celebrate the artists and to celebrate everything here. So we invite you all, we invite your organization to join us in our World Congress in Paris next July. We're going to have definitely a major theme on this. I know some of our colleagues are planning a special pre-conference event where they're going to all the different art exhibits. And so I make it particular that every time I'm in Paris, I buy something from a street vendor. And I take it home, and I spend 6 times more framing it than actually buying it. But that's not, but we'll have that conversation later. Right? Right? That's one of the entrepreneurial opportunities I'm seeking. And why am I paying 6 times more to frame than art than doing it? But it's okay. And with that, I want to thank Todd. I want to thank you, Joel, for coming today, for joining us here. I want to thank all the attendees for coming. This session was recorded. We're going to put it on our newsletter here, and we'll be in touch. Please stay safe, everybody, and I look forward to meeting you all. Take care, everybody.
Really appreciate it.
Bye, Jackie. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.